In 2022, Blizzard released the 22nd expansion for Hearthstone, March of the Lich King, and with it an 11th class for the game, Death Knight. But that means there were 21 expansions that Death Knight was not present for. Well, I'm here to fix that. I've previously made Death Knight cards for the first 13 expansions, and in this video I'll be showcasing the cards I made for Ashes of Outland, Scholomance Academy, and Madness at the Darkmoon Faire. In the Ashes of Outland expansion, we traveled to the ruined world known as Outland, and met all the creatures still living there. Creatures like Taribus the Cursed. Taribus is a 7-mana 9/9 undead dragon, and it is one of the legendaries I've made for Death Knight for Ashes of Outland. When you summon Taribus, it will start out dormant, but at the end of each of your turns while it's dormant, it will deal 2 damage to all enemies, and only once it has killed 5 enemies will it awaken. This effect could obviously be used to kill a big board right away, but if you play Taribus on a small or even empty board, it could still be threatening, because the opponent will be under constant pressure of 2 damage and will eventually have to feed Taribus 5 minions just to make it stop. Now is probably also a good time to mention that the cards in this video will be following a certain rule set, as you can see here. Anyway, to support Taribus, I decided to give Death Knight a big undead archetype for this expansion, so also made these 2 cards that support a big undead playstyle. In Ashes of Outland, each class got a legendary minion that shoved an upgraded prime version of itself into your deck when killed. For Death Knight, I've made this one, Shirak the Dead Watcher.
Souls ready to be harvested.
Shirak may look like a demon, but it's actually an undead construct created from many different corpses by Exarch Maladar. Shirak is a 2-mana 2/3 undead with Taunt and Death Rattle. Shuffle Shirak Prime into your deck.
So much magic to feed upon.
Shirak Prime is instead a 7-mana 6/7 undead with Taunt, and when it dies it will resurrect your 4 highest cost undead other than Shirak himself. These could even be some of the other big undead minions you just saw. Ashes of Outland also introduced a new cycle of minions called Imprisoned Minions that were dormant for 2 turns. Each class got one of these minions, except for Rogue and Shaman, and of course Death Knight. Well, earlier when I showed my rule set, you might have seen the rule that says a custom mini set would get released alongside these cards. I've actually already made that mini set. In it I showed an Imprisoned minion for Rogue and Shaman, as well as this one for Death Knight. Imprisoned Spirit is a 2-mana 4/5 undead Drene with an unholy rune, but it is dormant for 2 turns. Then when it awakens, it will summon 2 1/1 frail ghouls with charge that die at the end of the turn. Now let's move on to the next expansion, Scholomance Academy. Scholomance Academy took place on the prestigious Scholomance School of Magic, and it introduced us to dual class cards. Each class was paired with 2 other classes for 4 dual class cards with each class. Since all classes already have partners, I just decided to match Death Knight with the 2 classes I felt are most thematically similar, Warlock and Warrior. For the dual class cards with Warlock, I made this card, Curtinus Campus Security.
Do you hear the screams?
Curtinus is a 5-mana 7/8 legendary minion, but when you play him he will deal 3 damage to all other friendly characters. However, Curtinus will transform in your hand or deck once your hero's health has changed 5 times on your turns. This transformed version of Curtinus is now an undead, and after he has dealt 3 damage to all friendly characters, he will then deal 6 damage to all enemy characters. In general, both Warlock and Death Knight have a lot of tools to change their health, but I've still added all these dual class cards that support this archetype. For the dual class cards with Warrior, I made this legendary, Head Coach Dark Reaver.
That should teach you.
Dark Reaver is a 5-mana 3/6 undead with both Reborn and Taunt, and once he dies, he will give all your damaged minions +2/+2. Keep in mind that Death Rattle triggers before Reborn, so even though Dark Reaver returns damage, he won't actually buff himself. Since Reborn is such a big keyword for Death Knight, and Reborn minions return damaged, I figured these dual class cards for Death Knight and Warrior could all revolve around damaged minions in some way, as you can see with these cards. Dark Riding in particular could even be used on Head Coach Dark Reaver, and that way he will buff himself. Each class also got a non-dual class legendary, and I've made this one for Death Knight, the Ravinian. The Ravinian is a 5-mana 7/4 undead with 1 unholy rune and rush. After it attacks and kills a minion, your next frail ghoul will gain +1 attack for each excess damage. You probably all remember the Spellburst keyword from the Great Dark Beyond, but it was actually originally introduced in the Scholomance Academy. I've made this card for Death Knight that has Spellburst and supports the Ravinian. Scholomance Academy also introduced a small cycle of spells for a couple of the classes called Studies. I've also made a study for Death Knight, Necrotic Studies. Now let's move on to the last expansion of the video, Madness at the Darkmoon Faire. This expansion reintroduced us to the 4 old gods and all the horrors they've unleashed. Horrors like Sakash the Corruptor. Sakash is a 7-mana 5/9 legendary minion with 3 blood runes, and when you play him, he will add a permanent bloodstone artifact spell to your hand that gives a minion +3/+3 for 3 mana. Since the spell is permanent, it will stay in your hand no matter how many times you use it. Madness at the Darkmoon Faire came with the Corrupt keyword. Cards with this keyword will upgrade in your hand after you played a card with a higher cost, becoming corrupted as a result. For Death Knight, I've made this card with Corrupt, Prize Pumpkin. Prize Pumpkin is a 4-mana 4/5 minion with Taunt, and when you play it, it will spend 5 corpses to summon a copy of itself. But Prize Pumpkin can be corrupted, and once corrupted it will instead give you 5 corpses instead of spending them, but will still summon a copy. The last card I made for Death Knight is a legendary that might be used with Prize Pumpkin, Zombo the Clown. While Madness at the Darkmoon Faire featured old god themes, it was also all about carnivals and festivities, and this card is meant to reflect those sides. Zombo is a 4-mana 4/4 undead, and he has a powerful battle cry. After you spend corpses this game, a random minion in your hand will gain +1/+1 for each corpse spent. Well, those were all the cards I made for this video, but in a few weeks my next expansion, the Mongrel Horde, is coming out, and until that happens I've promised to end each of my videos with a card from the expansion. So here's Lesser Wax Golem for Rogue. This 1-mana 1/1 elemental will deal 1 damage when played, but will then upgrade once you return it to your hand. The upgraded Wax Golem is instead a 3/3 minion that will deal 3 damage, and upgrades once more into Greater Wax Golem when returned to your hand, which is a 5/5 minion that deals 5 damage when played, but can no longer be returned to your hand. That's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, you know the drill, and I will see you next time.